The world's largest economy just posted its largest ever trade deficit, $140.5 billion US. Behind that staggering number lies shaken investor confidence and deepening global realignments. As Washington turns its back on Beijing and pivots towards others, the ripple effects are being felt across the world, including right here in Southeast Asia. So is this a short-term jolt, or are we witnessing a more permanent redrawing of the global economic map? And what does it all mean for a country like Malaysia, sitting at the crossroads of opportunity and vulnerability? We now speak to Doris Liew. She's an economist specializing in Southeast Asian development. Now, Doris, the US trade deficit has ballooned to a record $140.5 billion USD. Is this merely a statistical anomaly driven by tariff front-running or a structural warning sign for the US economy?
Okay, so the record trade deficit is likely a short-term anomaly rather than a structural red flag right now. What we are seeing is probably a front-loading of imports, and businesses are rushing to bring in goods ahead of the expected tariff that was previously announced by Trump. So that kind of behavior is typical when trade tensions rise and companies want to avoid higher costs in the near future. However, while the current spike may be event-driven, if tariffs persist, we could see higher import costs in the US and increased pressure on US manufacturers, which would eventually then translate into real structural challenges for the economy.
So now we're seeing a pivot in the US trade away from China and toward countries like Vietnam, Ireland, Mexico. How significant is this realignment in the context of global supply chain geopolitics?
So reliance on Chinese goods poses serious geopolitical and also geoeconomic risks to the US, especially in critical sectors. I see this challenge as twofold. First, there's the economic side. So over time, heavy dependence on low-cost imports has contributed to the erosion of US manufacturing, so what many refer to as deindustrialization. American producers actually struggle to compete right now, and this is gradually weakening the structural foundation of the US economy. So decoupling from China is in part an attempt to kind of mitigate this slow but steady decline of the US economy, which we have seen in the past decades. Second, there's the strategic dimension. The US and China are engaged in a broader contest for global leadership, with tension playing out in pseudo regions like Taiwan, South China Sea, and the ports in Panama Canal in order to control strategic key routes. So as China rises, the US dominant position is being challenged. So Washington will see containing China as a key priority currently.
Okay, so there's been a reported capital flight into gold and silver. What does that tell us about investor confidence in the US dollar? And is this a warning for emerging markets like Malaysia?
Well, the shift definitely signals a decline in investor confidence in US dollar, which has long been regarded as a safe reserve asset. Gold and silver, we have to understand, are traditional safe havens. And when capital shifts in that direction, it usually reflects a growing concerns over some looming economic downturn, whether it's through inflation, geoeconomic instability, and weakening trust in fiat currencies. So for Malaysia in particular, these trends carries both a risk and opportunities. We see that. On one hand, it reflects broader global uncertainty and can lead to increased volatility in capital flows and financial market. So a weaker US dollar means also a reduced purchasing power among American consumers, which may cause a reduction in the demand for Malaysia's exports, as we know that US is one of our largest export destination markets. It may also prompt a risk assessment of our US reserve holding currently. On the other hand, Malaysia's exposure to dollar-denominated debt is relatively low, so which means that we won't be so much impacted by the volatility in the US dollar. So moving forward, I think our focus should not be about whether the US dollar will affect so much of Malaysia's trade and economy, but the focus should instead be on diversifying our trade partners and building resilience in export markets.
Yeah, before we end this, should we see all of this as an opportunity in this US-China decoupling, or should we be wary of its spillover effects?
There are certain spillover effects, I agree with you, but there are also many opportunities only if Malaysia navigates them strategically. So tariffs will affect our supply chain, there's no doubt about that, especially since both US and China are among our largest trade partners. So maintaining a neutral stance diplomatically will be also increasingly difficult given how the whole situation is very volatile and we are sort of caught in the middle currently. So from Washington's perspective, Malaysia isn't seen as a fully reliable partner because of our close economic tie with China. So I give two examples for this. First, Malaysia has become a China plus one destination. It means that Chinese firms have set up operations here to bypass US tariff. One of the examples of the industry is our solar panel industry. Second, the NVIDIA chip incidents, where high-end chips reportedly ended up in China via Malaysia, raises red flags for the US, given how this is of high strategic importance to them. So, but that said, we see that Malaysia still holds the leverage if we can mitigate these issues strategically, because we have a strong manufacturing base, particularly in electrical and electronic sector, and to some extent in food processing. So our rare earth reserves are also of the interest to the US, especially in light of China's export restriction. So we have to kind of maneuver it strategically and maintain good relations with China, with ASEAN, with Middle East, and increasingly also with alternative trade partners like the EU, who are seeking trade diversification. So this can be a win for Malaysia if we can improve that trade relations with them.
Yeah, that's quite a tightrope we have there for Malaysia. Long road ahead. Thank you so much, Doris. That was Doris Liew. She's an economist looking at Southeast Asian development.